right, we now re-welcome everybody. This is the regular meeting of Municipal Council for the 11th of October. We have, just to remind you that we're live streaming, we have an agenda. Now, just before we approve the agenda, I'm just going to ask that we bring item 19, which is the item that we just had the public hearing regarding, and we put that as 2A immediately after the minutes. And that's done for a variety of reasons. There may be some people here who are interested in that, but also to technically we're not allowed to receive submissions between public hearing and making a decision as council. So we don't want to run the risk that someone gets up in the public participation period and makes a presentation. So with that change, could I have a motion
Second.
to approve? Thank you very much. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. We have minutes and to receive. The first is the public hearing, not the one we just had, but one on the 19th of
Move
September.
approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Any changes? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. The next is our council meeting of September 19th for the minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. Any changes, alterations? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. We now move to what was 19, and that is the third reading and adoption following the public hearing that we just had.
Move third reading bylaw 4669.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Yes, go ahead, please, Councillor Zelko.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. Question for staff. I just wanted to confirm the intent of this process, I understand, is to update our bylaws to be more in alignment, I believe, with the current laws as they are laid out in statute. I just want to confirm that assumption, please.
Ms. Jensen, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, the proposal that's in front of council for tonight's public hearing and consideration of third and fourth reading is a result of an application. And coincidentally, last year the province did legislate that all land use contracts should be removed by 2024, but this specific one is a result of the application to undertake additional works at Glen Lyon Norfolk School.
Follow up, if I may?
Yes, please.
Why do we have to remove land use contracts by a certain date, please?
Well, I don't know if Ms. Jensen can speak on behalf of the province, because it is the province's directive. Is that correct? Yes, thank you.
So the essence essentially is to just basically make sure all of our land use is in alignment with whatever's, like, for example, the Local Government Act and the various building codes and those sorts of things, as opposed to one-offs, such as we have in Oak Bay on this particular property.
Yes, there are a number of other land use contracts that still exist within Oak Bay, and staff will have to be taking a look at those sometime over the next few years.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Any other discussion? So we're at third reading. Seeing no hands. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And the final one is
Move final reading.
final reading, also used to be known as adoption. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much, and thanks for bringing that forward, Ms. Jensen. Good. Now let's return with me, if you will, to number 3, which are my remarks, Mayor's remarks. They're not as numerous as they were last time because they had been built up over the whole summer. And that, first and foremost, this is a kind of a heads up and a plea to all of our residents who are gathering their leaves. Please do not collect them in the streets and near catch basins or storm mains. They clog them, and that can itself result in flooding. We know there's a storm a-coming I'll say Thursday, but according to my app, it said it's probably arriving overnight, as early as overnight. So please do not place leaves on the streets, in the gutters, or on the sidewalks. It's a hazard for walkers, for cyclists, and for basements, because you don't want your neighbor's basement flooded because you clogged up your catch basin. On the boulevards, please, and if possible, do not gather the leaves in plastic bags, but loose so they can be vacuumed. All righty? So I urge all of our residents to follow that. I don't know, someone will want to tweet that out before the storm. Any of those tweeters amongst us? Okay. I report on the Victoria Marathon. I had the pleasure of attending a number of events. One of them was the media launch, where perhaps with some cheek, I suggested that because the marathon is half is run in Oak Bay, we can perhaps call it in the future the Victoria Oak Bay Marathon, and I had a little sign that showed them how to do that. They were amused, and I suggested we could wait till the 40th anniversary. So this was the 37th anniversary, and I also had an opportunity to start the race in the sense of saying, on your mark, get set, go, very early Sunday morning. And I want to recognize all the volunteers who assisted. There are hundreds of volunteers at almost every intersection, and they do a marvelous job organizing them. And I saw a lot of young people out, 14, 15, that were a little drowsy, but they were there, they were helping out, and I passed on our thanks. I did note that we had one resident who sent us an email today concerning an emergency he was involved in and some issues about crossing at that point. So that's being forwarded to the race organizer, so we won't have that problem in the future. I also, with some of you, had the pleasure to attend the gospel choir presentation on Saturday night. We were very lucky and graced by the presence of Her Honor, Lieutenant Governor Guichon, who was there, who tweeted out a very congratulatory message later. And it was all in the aid of putting together $100,000 so the school can have a fantastic grand piano to go with their fantastic theater, which we can proudly say as a council, we contributed $1 million to ensure that we have that facility here. We're speaking to one of the organizers, or one of the persons, teachers who looks after the theater. There's already 92 bookings for that theater. So it's very busy, but it was quite an event, not the least of which because I got to sing one song with the choir. So it was a lot of fun all around. Now, and then on a climate change note, the province has a climate change secretariat, I think is the proper name, to which we report our climate actions, I should say, in our community. And I'm happy to note that we're continuing to do well, meeting our goals, sufficient for us to be listed as a BC Climate Action Community 2015. It's audited the year after. And so we're doing very well there. Obviously, we can always do more, and we'll always look for green initiatives for that, so we can continue that. Now we've been a member of that group for a number of years, and it is an honor to allowed to use that logo on our website as well as our correspondence. So congratulations and thanks to the staff. I know we've been making fantastic gains over in the rec center, for instance, reducing our energy consumption. So keep it up, and thank you very much. Public participation period. We have 20 minutes to cover this particular topic. People get up to 3 minutes each in that 20 minutes. I start a timer, and the person comes to the microphone, gives their name, again fills out if they could write their name and their community, and then they start when I formally welcome them. I'll start that timer. Councillor Zelka, please.
I apologize, Chair. Is it possible to ask a question about the mayor's remarks, or should I hold my comments until new business?
Yeah, I think you can bring them up under new business. I
Thank
think
you.
it's appropriate. And that reminds me, there's 6 of us up here tonight. Councillor Croft is away in Eastern Canada. He couldn't join us. So I invite the first person to come forward, please. Yes, identify yourself, your community, and just scribble down your name so we have the right spelling for our minutes, and your community, please. And then when I say welcome, except that welcome, but I say the next welcome, then I start the time. So your name?
My name is Philip Wynn. I'm a resident of Oak Bay Municipality.
Mr. Wynn, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm here to speak about opportunities to improve the pathways and for cyclists and pedestrians in our community. I've been here before. This is my second visit on this topic. I understand you have a copy of the presentation that I have prepared.
Yes,
You'll
it's
note
been
that,
circulated. Yes, thank you, Mr. Wynn.
Thank you. And you'll note that there are 15 slides, and as you said, I have 3 minutes to address these. That works out to 180 seconds or 14 seconds per slide. So please, we'll be going quickly through that. The particular pathway, I want to talk today about one particular pathway. It's a short section. I think you'll be very familiar with it. It's at the south end of Henderson, and it runs between Carnarvon Park and down through to Haltane Street. It's just 3 short blocks. In the first block, there's it's a shared pathway with motor vehicles, and the other 2 blocks, there are no motor vehicles allowed on that. This is an important connector route. It connects Oak Bay High, Willows Elementary, Lansdowne Middle School, Oak Bay Village, UVic, and the shopping center down at Fort and Foul Bay. It feeds commuter cyclists from Oak Bay down onto Haltane and on into downtown areas. So it's currently a very busy route. It's actively used by both pedestrians and cyclists. If you go to the slide with the first photo that I have there, you can see that this route is actually signed with an official CRD sign. This is great. We're very pleased to see that. The sign indicates that it is a bike route going northbound up to the University of Victoria to Carnarvon Park. And if you were to go straight ahead, eastbound on Haltane, you'd be going into Estevan Village. So going northbound, I have a photo. It begins, as I say, a shared pathway. It's a lane between a large apartment building on the right-hand side. We're going north, and some houses on the left. It'd be nice if there was a little bike logo on that lane, just to indicate that you now are on the bike lane. It begins to narrow, and there is no longer room at this section for a cyclist or a pedestrian if there is a car also on the laneway at the same point. If we could go on now to the slide titled Wooton Street to Kings, you'll note that here the pathway is really narrowed down to a little walking path. There's 3 hazards along this section, just in this little bit. You can see there's a rock wall. It's a very narrow path, and there's a steel chicane barrier.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Is that
Wynn.
3 minutes?
That's 3 minutes.
Enjoy the rest of my presentation on your own.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And although we're not going to make any decisions or comments on your presentation tonight, I know our new engineer, Mr. Horn, back there, has listened attentively, and he has the presentation also. And I know there's some initiatives that over the next little while we'll be seeing come forward to council. So thank you very much for this, Mr. Wynn. Very helpful to understand what the issues are. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Welcome, Mr. Schmelzer. I preempted you because I knew your name.
Okay. My name is Gerald Smeltzer, 2540 Dorset Road in Oak Bay. I'm here to speak about the intersection at Lansdowne and Foul Bay. The intersection is a shared responsibility between Oak Bay and the District of Saanich. It is probably the busiest intersection in Oak Bay. Vehicle counts of over 2,200 vehicles at a peak hour. And it's also part of Oak Bay's contribution, if you like, to the regional traffic network, and particularly to the safety of cycling and cyclists and pedestrians. A bit of history on this intersection. In 2014 and 2015, there was a flurry of both funding announcements and announcements about the upgrading of that intersection. And Mr. Mayor, you were prominent in many of those announcements, along with other individuals such as Jennifer Black, the transportation manager from the CRD, Lindsay Wallace, ICBC's Director of Road Safety, Councillor Kirby. And I'll just say that I think you captured it effectively in the Oak Bay News in October 2014. This upgrade of the intersection at Lansdowne and Foul Bay Road will serve to implement the flow of traffic, improve the flow of traffic and the safety of cyclists. That's one of our busiest cycling corridors. And there was a one-page description posted in March of 2015 on our own website. Councillor Kirby's remarks were this new bike lane for northbound cyclists, which would be the Oak Bay responsibility, will make navigating this busy intersection safe and more enjoyable for all. The background again, in terms of funding, there were 3 funding agencies that contributed dollars for this intersection improvements. ICBC, the CRD, and then the province through the Bike BC cost sharing program. The total was $168,000 approximately. The difficulty that I have with the intersection right now is Saanich seems to have completed its work. The photographs in your materials show, it'll be page 5 in the materials. There are 2 photographs of what the intersection looked like in September 2013, and that's the Foul Bay Road going north, Oak Bay side. And the 2 following photographs show the same perspective with virtually no change. And those were taken in September of this year, so 3 years later. The photographs that appear after that, if you go a couple more pages ahead, shows Saanich's perspective. This is Foul Bay Road going south, and those were taken in, the first photograph was taken in September 2013. Oh, and I'm there, aren't I? Okay.
That's for whom the bell tolls, Mr.
Yes,
Schmelzer.
exactly.
Thank you very much. We do have your presentation,
Right.
and I'll say the same thing that I said to Mr. Wynn, is that our staff have that. Mr. Horn has that. I don't know if you may have already spoken to him directly. He's aware of the issues, and as I say, hopefully there'll be some initiatives coming forward.
We
So
would
thank
just
you-
look
thank you very
forward to
much.
being part of the strategic priorities.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to address us on a topic touching on Oak Bay? All right, I see no other people coming to the microphone. I thank you very much, and I thank the 2 speakers. And if you just bear with me, I'm going to get back on. Yes, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. Is this a good time to remind our audience about the upcoming priorities and planning meeting that's open to the public?
Well, I think that's something you can do under new business. Okay,
Okay,
not
great.
at this point, thank you. The next item, we're on number 5. This is the somewhat long-standing Uplands combined sewer separation project. And certainly for the last 18 months, we've been reaching out to our community, looking at a series of different options, looking at issues within each of those options, such as directional drilling, use of easements. We've had numerous open houses. We have had surveys with feedbacks. We had special meetings. And in particular, last week, we had a special meeting of the Committee of the Whole dealing exclusively with the issue of sewer separation. We had at that point presentations from Mr. Hull, who is here with us tonight, and we reviewed. We listened also at that point. We listened to the public. I think there was 4 or so speakers, 3 or 4 speakers that had, and we dealt with some of the issues there, which were implementation issues. But following that, the Committee of the Whole, the 6 of us who you see here tonight, voted to recommend to the 6 of us who you sit here, that we're sitting now as legislative, to proceed with the recommended option. So that is now before us. Mr. Hall is here. Should any members of council have any questions for him, arising either from a re-review of all of those documents, and I can tell you this is just a small portion of them that we have been dealing with, and there's many, many more reports than that, or something that's occurred as a result of the last meeting, or anything that's come up. So Mr. Hull is here, excuse me, in order to answer any questions. And then following that, I would invite a motion. All right, go ahead, please, Councillor Nave.
Mr. Mayor, my question is to staff, if I may. Is that appropriate?
Oh, go ahead, yes,
yeah,
please.
Okay, through you, staff.
Because Mr. Horn will be carrying the load here. Once we get through the planning process and we get to the implementation, then Mr. Horn's group will look after that. Thank you.
Thank you. So at the public hearing we had, I did state that my frustration with this whole process, having been strong-armed into doing this work through a provincial regulation, and the amount of money that it costs our community is very high. And we haven't been shown any environmental impact except for the overflows. But that said, we are going forward, and we have before us a motion to move forward with option 4. But my question through you, Chair, to staff really has to do with some clarifications around the cost for our taxpayers. And I do appreciate that this is complex, because we've talked about phasing the project in, and staff has also let us know that they will be actively pursuing grant opportunities to minimize the costs as best we can to our taxpayers. And I do understand also that we've got $7 million in the bank for the infrastructure portion of this, and that we do also intend to access future gas tax funding and other grant opportunities. That all said, I think, at least in my conversations with people in the community, they're looking like, how much will this cost us? And it's difficult to respond to that, because there are so many moving parts and possibilities and variables, really. But I wonder if staff could really just help us understand, so that people can have some sense, given we're going through with the Humber portion of this project, what that sort of the upper and lower possibility of the cost might be to per household, something like that. Some sense, so that taxpayers have some sense. How much is that going to cost them in their pocket?
And if we may want to split that into 2, if that's even possible, because as we know, the overall cost is approximately 21 million. 15 will be borne by all of the municipality, including Uplanders and South Oak Bay and Central, all of us, all taxpayers. And then there's the portion which is just on private lands, that will be borne by the individual homeowner, and that's been estimated to be about $6 million. So there is it is a dual part question. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Ney. You've touched on a lot of the things that I would have said already to answer that question. So if I repeat some of the things you said, forgive me. But for the most part, it is difficult to answer that question for the individual property homeowner with the overall, because of all the variables that are involved. The engineering work to date, as you mentioned, splits the cost into private property owners to $6.4 million and the whole community cost to $15.1 million. And with the district already having set aside the federal gas tax money of $7 million in reserves to help fund this project. The challenge in answering this question has to do with so many variables relating to specific cost estimates for individual property owners. For example, the results of our efforts to seek federal, provincial grants in the future, for example, the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund has just been identified $450 million worth of grants for projects like ours, covering up to 83% of the funding for project costs. So how much of that can have an impact on what the individual property owners have to pay in terms of funding this project, if any? The phasing of the project based on our grant opportunities now and in the future, our financing and funding considerations year to year, practical engineering considerations, and the priority decisions of council all have an impact on whether there's a cost to the individual homeowners or not in the long run. So our goal will be to maximize grant opportunities and have the best possible impact on Oak Bay taxpayers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. Now, I would entertain a motion so we can enter on the discussion.
I'll move the motion as per the explanatory note from the Deputy Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you very much. Moved and seconded, and this was in essence the motion that we dealt with in quite a lot of detail over the last 18 months, and in particular over at the Committee of the Whole. I'm going to see if there's any discussion. Yes, go ahead, please, Councillor Zelko.
Thank you very much, Chair. And my understanding is that this plan is calling for us to complete the separation within 30 years. So that over 30 years, I understand that it'll be broken up into approximately $2 million contracts, maybe larger, depending on the possible granting opportunities. That would be one question for staff. I just wanted to ask a second question, sort of a bundle, is that does 30 years give us enough flexibility to look for enough granting opportunities to minimize the impact to our Oak Bay taxpayers? And of course, this is relating specifically only to the $15 million portion, not the $7 million portion that is for the upland landowners.
I don't want to put too much of a cynical spin on there, but if it's over the 30 years, that's about 7.5 elections federally and provincially. And there tends often to be grant opportunities associated with that cycle. Mr. Horn, or maybe Ms. Koning?
Yeah, I think it might be more appropriate here. I think that we want to let council know that when we were actually presenting this before the Committee of the Whole, I think a week ago, and Councillor Zelka, I think you had raised about the funding opportunity that had come up, the $450 million, and you asked about the portion that would be borne by the municipality. Traditionally, those have been one-third, but you're absolutely correct in that was a 17-cent dollar, and so that's unusual, and that's one that we'd want to take probably particular advantage of. So I think that's our first step. So it may not be $2 million to start with. If we have more success, for that kind of savings to the taxpayer is huge. So I think that we think that the 30 years, as the consultants I think tried to explain last week, that's sufficient amount of time for us to get it done. And what an opportunity that within the week that we were presenting this, that grant option became available.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'm going to call the questions. Not seeing anyone want to discuss this. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Now, just so you wonder why we haven't discussed a lot, I don't know how many meetings we had where we have discussed this. So this is just a culmination of taking that vote. So this marks a pretty significant step forward in dealing with this issue. I've been on council 2 decades, and I think most of those 2 decades at one time or another, this issue has been raised. I think Mr. Horn came across a report from the early 90s even on this very issue. So it is a major step forward, and it's a very important environmental step forward too. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to staff and Mr. Hull for steering it in the last 18 months to this completion, something that we've had difficulties doing up till now with this project. So thank you. And I also want to take an opportunity to thank all the residents, particularly many residents of the Uplands who came out during the open houses, during the public meetings, and came up with some good ideas. And I think at the end of the day made this a more focused and a better plan. So thank you very much to everybody. Yeah, and a less controversial matter. Request for poppy tag days, please. Item 6.
Move approval.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. Heritage referral for property at 1110. This is a proposal by the Victoria Golf Course, Golf Club, located at that address, 1110 Beach Drive, to do some changes. And the recommendation we have here from our staff is that this should be referred to the Heritage Commission for review and recommendation.
Before you get into discussion, I'm just going to recuse myself. I'm a member of the club, and I have a sort of an indirect pecuniary interest in this, so I'm going to recuse myself.
And
Thank you.
I'm actually a social member at the club. Do I need to recuse myself?
So
or
you're...
a social member at the club, not a golfing member?
It's tough
Social
because
is- I'm going to recuse myself too then, thank you.
all right. Depending on where you sit, that leaves the right hand side, the right side of council, or perhaps the left side of council. So
I'll move the recommendation.
we do have a quorum.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion. This is to refer it to the Heritage Commission. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. The golfer and the socializer can return. Now we have, thank you. Now, number 8, and as a request to consider establishment of a heritage conservation area. We have a piece of correspondence from Barb and Ken Grant. We're both here at the back. And that is to consider an area bordered by York Place, San Carlos, Beach Drive, and Oak Bay Avenue, including Prospect Place, to be a particular heritage protected area, or formerly known as the Heritage Conservation Area. I think we might have one of the group coming forward just to address what the intention is. I think we all know that this would be a significant step forward, and it's not been done here in Oak Bay before. We have touched on the idea some years ago, and we got certain advice from a planner that this is, embarking on this, although it's a small area, still is a significant piece of work for council and consultants. So, who is going to address? Yes, thank you very much. Name, and you live in Oak Bay, that much we know. And you're Michael Prince.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'll try to have my back. I'm Michael Prince. I live at 1525 Prospect Place here in Oak Bay, smack dab in the middle of the proposed Heritage Conservation Area. I'm joined here tonight, as you say, with a number of other residents and friends. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to have them identify themselves or stand up.
Just
or
a
raise
wave
their
would
hand.
be good enough.
But just
wave. Hi. Okay.
Well,
you can't all be on TV. Those
yeah,
ones at the back.
Well, they try.
Those ones at the back cannot be seen.
Hi, kids. Anyways. So we appreciate the opportunity tonight, Mr. Mayor, to speak to this correspondence, which you have in front of you, and you've referred to the map which we've provided, and that's a very tentative or provisional set of boundaries, which of course, as this proceeds, could be adjusted depending on neighbors' interests and whatnot. There's 58 homes in that area, in that map. We have 42 of the property owners have indicated support for exploring the option of an HCA. Of the remaining 16, 10 we've not heard back from, or they're away on holidays. 4 or 5 are renters, and we've tried to get in touch with property owners. 1 or 2 have said they're either not interested or they're a wait-and-see attitude on the whole process. But at this stage, after just working on this for the past 2 or 3 months, we're delighted to have about 70-odd% of the property owners indicating, in principle, approval of the idea of an HCA for this area. So we're very heartened by that. As you said, this is something that would be new for Oak Bay, although it is recognized in the official community plan and also the Heritage Strategic Plan as something that is worth looking at. And we've worked already with the Heritage Foundation and the Heritage Commission, and Councillor Murdoch in that role as liaison to council, and pleased that we received $2,500 support for hiring a consultant, heritage planner, to look at developing a statement of significance, which, as you know, is a key first step in working towards an HCA. And we're also realized that this would, in trying to factor it into your strategic priority sessions, this is a new ask, and it would involve some time and some money. And we're happy to be part of that conversation about how this would actually be administered, what kind of governance model. And I think we could see the role of the foundation and the commission, the archives as well, playing a supplementary role, but also some of the neighbors in some kind of community-based advisory committee that would be attached to the Heritage Commission. We also realize it would probably involve some additional expenditures on the part of council and staff to have additional support on planning, and we're interested in working with council on how to explore that option and moving forward. So I hope we get a chance to appear before you in front of a committee of the whole to give a more fulsome presentation with a fancy slideshow that we've got. Okay. So, but if there's any time remaining, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
We love fancy and we love slideshows.
Okay.
So that's good. That's why we have 3 screens here.
Excellent.
Let's just see if there are any questions. And just before people jump into that, and you may have seen the our Director of Corporate Services note suggesting 1 or 2 alternatives and perhaps then sequencing them. One would be, as what you just suggested, going to the Committee of the Whole, where we can have a better understanding. This is novel. I've certainly gotten, as a result of your correspondence and meeting with the neighbors, I've certainly informed myself, but there's lots of information out there. And I think a very good way for us to explore that, explore the costs, the implications and all of that, would be to go to the Committee of the Whole. That would give us, I think, the informational base to have a sense of putting this to a strategic priority session, whether it be the one upcoming or the one after that, and talking a little bit about budgeting. So I think that's, if we could sequence it in that way, that I think probably is the best way to kind of have this, to gather information and then to gather steam, depending on where council wants to take this. Now let's see if there's any questions. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I'm really thrilled that you guys have brought this forward. There's so many houses I know in this area that have such a historical and architectural significance. I believe that there's 11 out of that, just in that area, out of a total of 28 in all of Oak Bay. So I think it's very important that that we do something to protect those houses, or to protect that area. I would love to know if we have any idea from staff on any particular cost estimate of doing something like this, or is that just something that we have no clue of yet?
Well, if I could just jump in, I think that's something we could tease out, as it were, or get informed on at a Committee of the Whole, because other communities no doubt have gone through this, and I don't know if anyone's gone through this size, or we hear about Vancouver It's a large part of Shaughnessy, for instance, and that took some doing. So that's the kind of information I think that we could bring forward, or ask staff to bring forward at a committee of the whole, as opposed to, unless you have the figures right here.
No. Well, it'll be very interesting to see that. So when the time is appropriate after my colleagues have made their comments, I would be happy to move this forward to committee of the whole.
Okay, thank you. And that was Councillor Braithwaite, for those of you watching at home. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to slip in your name before you started. Councillor Murdoch is next. Thank you.
Thank you, through Chair. I may have a slight amendment to your motion, but I'll second it if I'll just assume that you're making it. The question I have for Mr. Prince is, just for clarification, the neighborhood group is at this time prepared to move forward with the application. Is that where we're at right now?
What, and then by that you mean you just?
I'm just trying to. We have a choice here, sort of going to strategic priorities or go to committee of the whole. And I look at this in one of two ways. If this is sort of, should we look at a process and what would that look like, and is this seeking information? Then I think that's something that, in the abstract, developing a policy would be probably on the priorities list. Should this be an application that you're looking to move forward with it, I think we have to treat this differently as an application, which would take it out of the political realm, and essentially we would just deal with it as any land use application would be. That, to my mind, that's the split. So I'm just trying to get clarity in my mind. If there's something is that you're prepared to move, or that the group is prepared to move forward with at this time, granted it may be a slow process, then I think we have to be a bit careful about not trying to make this a political, is it our priority, but treat it as an application.
If I could answer that?
Yes,
sure. Thank you for that clarification. I think that if I could dare to speak on behalf of most of my neighbors, and many of whom are here tonight, that there's a desire to keep moving this forward and have momentum. There's also concern about possible risks of a few properties in the area. So I think the sense of a lot of people is the sooner we are seen making momentum on this, even if we don't get to a bylaw, quickly, but that there's a clear indication on the part of the corporation that we're concerned about long-term protection of the heritage, and not just the buildings, but the streetscape and so forth. So I hope that answers. So I think, say, the application would probably be more what's in line with what the neighbors are feeling about.
And that's something at a committee of the whole, we can also talk about the steps in the process. What are the legal steps, but also, too, what are the community steps we want to take, right?
Right.
Because I think there's a difference between the two. There's obviously ones that we have to take in terms of bylaws and stuff, much like we had a public hearing tonight, which was a legal requirement. But it's more than that. It really is the consultation process that we'd want to look at. Another question, Councillor?
No, I just, I guess, as a follow-on to that, not a question, but just, I think that would be the amendment I would make to the motion, proposed amendment, which would just be to add that staff be directed to report at that committee of the whole a proposed heritage conservation area process and some preliminary costing.
Okay.
So we could have some framework for that. You seem to indicate that sort of implied, but just so we have some sense of what that would actually look like, some timelines and so forth. And then I think if that's going to create some major issues, then we can take that to the priorities piece. But I think that's an important part when it comes forward, that we're having the conversation just with the applicants, but we have some meat from staff, some grounding that we have to make a decision on. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not even sure, when I look here at the proposal for a motion, is it implicit in there you'd come forward with a staff report, or should there be something explicit on that? Ms. Koning, yeah.
I would suggest that we will do our best to try to provide a little bit of meat for the conversation for council. I don't know that we would have firm numbers, facts or figures or timelines, but we probably could give something in terms of some research, provided we have enough time between now and the committee of whole meeting.
Yep, and what we're looking for is high level, right? We're not going to drill down on how much cost. So, and I suspect it will not be the next committee of the whole.
Oh.
So this is going to be a long process, I would think, but a valuable process to understand. But I think we need to understand right at the beginning what it's going to take. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Ney, please.
Yeah, I just to to follow up, I fully agree with that. It'd be nice just to get the scope of what we would be in for as we move through this process. But that taken care of, I just want to say to you, Dr. Prince, you and your neighbors, I'm just really impressed with what you've been able to do, how this neighborhood has been able to coordinate and envision this project. I'm particularly impressed by the grassroots, bottom-up approach that you've taken, and that in itself, I think, increases the likelihood of the success of this property. And I really appreciate what you're doing, because this is all parts of Oak Bay are special, of course they are, but this has there's some iconic properties in this in this area that should this regulation go through will ensure the long-term preservation of them. So thank you very much to you and all your neighbors and friends for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Okay, questions rather than comments at this stage. Because we don't have a motion at this point on the floor, so let's see if there's any questions.
I have one question, just to follow up on something that you said. Do you really think it's going to be a really long process? I mean, I'm a bit confused with that.
It's not going to be a couple of months. I can assure you that. It's not going to be, I wouldn't think it'd be as long as we took on the hotel, but somewhere in between that, I would think.
What, a couple of months and 3 years?
Short for a couple of years. You know, not having been through it, but having been through a kind of a macro OCP, and this is a very small portion of a kind of an OCP, but we also saw how long it took to put together the Heritage Strategic Plan. We did a lot of groundwork there. So again, it's a variant of those kinds of processes where consultants would be hired. And I think probably going through, if we're going to go down this path the first time, I think we would want to be much more thorough. So it could create a very stable blueprint for others. So, and I don't think it's in anyone's interest to rush something like that, because there are a lot of groups that will want to be heard. Heritage, obviously the homeowners, and so that does take time, and we've seen that in sewer separation, which was in large part consultation, took us 18 months. So perhaps somewhere between 3 months and 18. I wouldn't hazard a guess until we've heard perhaps from staff who maybe can look at how long it's taken in other communities, particularly the first time around. And I'm not sure Vancouver is a good example, because theirs was a huge area, or certainly in terms of assessed value, if nothing else, in the Shaughnessy area. So, and I know there was a lot of struggles there. I don't know how long that took, but
that was the reaction to demolitions happening almost weekly around people.
Yep.
That was an apocalyptic scenario.
Yep.
What we're trying to do is be proactive,
right.
and this is truly grassroots up. And so this isn't an NIMBYism. This isn't a community in fear, as in Shaughnessy, which has led to some threatened litigation. We know it'll take time, but we do want to build on the groundwork that's already been laid on the Strategic Heritage Plan. And unlike the sewage treatment, where people are going to be facing pocketbook costs, this is a win-win. Property values will go up. The evidence is quite clear in the United States and Canada. In heritage district areas, property values go up both in absolute and relative terms, and it enhances municipal tax base. So it's a very different kind of politics and money on that score. The beautiful thing is we're also going to be protecting some of the greatest architects in the Western Canada in this area. So cultural tourism, et cetera. So I appreciate it'll take some time, but this has got win-win all over it. So.
Thank you very much. All right. Any other questions? Because if not, okay, go ahead. Because if not, I'd like to get to a motion, please.
Yes,
Thank
some
you.
quick questions. Could you please remind me, Mr. Prince, did you say you've already raised some money for this initiative? Amongst your group? I heard about 2,500.
Well, we received support from the Heritage Foundation very generously. We appeared before them a month or so ago, and they endorsed unanimously the idea of hiring a heritage consultant out of Vancouver, Denise Cook, and she's now begun the work to develop a statement of significance for
That's
the
absolutely
area.
fantastic.
So,
I do know that from my just sort of general survey of looking at what our sister districts and cities have done, we seem to be, Oak Bay seems to be a bit late to the game in terms of heritage. These heritage conservation areas are kind of old hat in Victoria and some parts of Saanich and elsewhere. So I've noticed that for other legislations, we tend to copy the best practices, let other districts and cities make the mistakes, and then we just pick up the best pieces.
Yeah.
So I think in this opportunity, we may be able to actually, again, save some money and use some of the wonderful, not only the legislation, but also some of the people that may be coming up for availability. I've heard some people in Victoria, for example, might be available under contract should we need to hire anyone. So I do appreciate you bringing this forward. I'm very excited about this. I would call this sort of the opposite of NIMBYism. Instead of like, please, we do want this in our backyard, whatever that's called. I'm actually quite excited about that. I would hope it would move a bit faster. I know that Oak Bay, from my research again on heritage, Oak Bay tends to be very tentative. I don't quite understand. We've been very tentative to move forward with a application of any heritage sort of land use abilities. Some of the wonderful books on Oak Bay heritage kind of bemoan that fact over the years, as we've lost so much heritage already. So I appreciate you moving forward on this. I'm being inspired. I just bought up on Gibbs, and I'm going like, this needs to be a heritage conservation area as well. I'm sure many other places. Maybe the Uplands needs to be a heritage conservation area. Who knows what sort of things you'll be bringing forward in terms of ideas for others. I do notice, however, Committee of the Whole next is 17th of October. And you're suggesting that this, because I do support this coming forward to a Committee of the Whole for further information. The next Committee of the Whole after that is 21 of October. That puts it past our strategic priorities meeting on the 4th of November. That, of course, is open to the public. So we'll have to see how this sort of plays out. And I would certainly hope that that will all show some wonderful desire to move this forward, since I know there are some concerns with outside forces moving in, possibly trying to change Oak Bay in ways that some Oak Bay residents don't want to see. So I would definitely moving forward this going to Committee of the Whole as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're looking for a motion.
So I will, can I just clarify something first? So if it does come to the next Committee of the Whole, if we can just go through staff to find out, or not the next Committee of the Whole, but maybe perhaps the one after that, is that correct that it is not until November 21st? And our strategic planning session is November, yeah. So I would like to see it come to our strategic planning session in this November to have a discussion around it. Is that pushing that too much, or?
Well, it isn't. It's certainly possible, but the question, I guess, that we'd have to ask ourselves is, do we have enough information to make an informed decision? That's one. The other thing is, too, I don't think there's any particular magic about that date, because following that, if we feel that there is a need to change our strategic plans 6 months after that, there's nothing really preventing us from saying, we're going to take out item 8 and replace it with this new item. So it is an organic instrument in the sense that we've also, talked about when opportunities come along, we seize them. So I don't think it's just because we don't consider it on the 4th of November, which I think is the date. That doesn't mean we're not going to get to it for another whole year.
Well, if that's the correct understanding, that we could add it in at some point, because I would hate to see us put this off for a whole year, then I would be fine making the motion that, the first motion on the explanatory note, which says that the proponents requesting consideration of a heritage conservation area be invited to attend a future Committee of the Whole and provide a more detailed presentation.
And I think implicit in that, Ms. Koning, would be that we'd have a high-level report from staff, so we they bring that together, your presentations and staff information. Okay.
And I'd be fine to second that.
Okay. Discussion. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would hope that yes, staff would bring some information forward, and I would also hope that since we do have heritage experts, in fact, sitting right here in the audience. I see retired heritage planners. I see chair of the Advisory Planning Commission, the chair of the Heritage Commission. I see other members who were chosen for those committees and commissions that have heritage expertise. I would hope that staff would reach out and ask the experts we have amongst us. I'm sure they may be willing to volunteer their time. Thank you.
Yeah. And there's no doubt that this kind of initiative would go through the Heritage Commission and the Advisory Planning Commission, because that's tied together. So I don't think you have to hope. I think that's what's going to happen. Okay.
I'm sorry, Chair. This is not exactly what I meant. What I meant was with the development of the staff report, separate from going through a formal process, that possibly they could reach out to some of our expert volunteers already on our commissions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much, Mr. Prince. And
Thank you, Mayor.
thank you very much to all the neighbors who've come out tonight. I appreciate your attendance. And well, we look forward to the journey. Thank you.
And maybe a reminder to everybody that next Wednesday night is at Windsor Park Pavilion is the Heritage Series talk on Samuel McClure, and it starts at 7 p.m. And it's a lecture by Jim Wolfe, Heritage Planner for Burnaby, on the architecture of Samuel McClure.
Thank you.
I'm meeting with him too. One-on-one. Thank you. Thank you.
Going to number 9, request for tax exemption. This is the Threshold Society, which I met with very recently. I think it was the same date as their letter. And I met with Mr. Mark Muldoon, the Executive Director, who I see here, and also the Chair of the Board of Directors, Dennis Anholt, who I also see here. I just note that later on, in the agenda, we do have a bylaw coming before us with respect to a similar issue. That is item number 20 for first, second, and third reading, to do with property tax exemptions for, these are properties that we own that have things like the lawn bowling, guides, scouts, and another one. Another group with Little League, is it?
It's the tea house.
Okay. That's right. So welcome here to both of you. We have your letter. We also have, as you may have seen, a report from a short report from a request for tax exemption from our Director of Corporate Services. There's kind of two possibilities for us moving forward. And there is one that's not considered in there, and that is the possibility of a grant process to as an alternative. And I know that's something that when I met with the two of you and I think your CFO that we discussed. All right. So introduce yourself, please, Mr. Anholt.
Thank you. My name is Dennis Anholt. I'm chair of the board of directors of Threshold Housing Society. Thank you very much for inviting us to be here tonight, and thank you for entertaining our request. I trust that most of you are familiar with our building, our new building, the former Easter Seal House that was used by Oak Bay United Church. We've been most welcomed into the community by the church and its congregation, and also by the neighborhood. And so we consider ourselves very fortunate to have that house and to have entered into a 5-year lease. My colleague, our executive director, will tell you a little bit more about Threshold and what I think is the amazing work that we do in this community with youth and youth homelessness. Our request for an exemption, I think it will amount to something like $7,500 or something in that neighborhood. That's roughly what it has been. Am I wrong?
If I can help you, it's $4,223. The overall amount of your taxes, we can't exempt the whole. We can only exempt what we collect. The other is, if I can describe it, as flow-through money that we collect on behalf, for instance, of CRD and other organizations that we just collect, but then turn over to them.
I
It
see.
doesn't go through our books, so to speak. We do see it as incoming and outgoing on our books, but so the only power that we have is to exempt for the amount of money that we would take in, which is 4223.
Well, 4223 is still big money to us. Like all nonprofit societies, we struggle to balance our books, and over the course of 5 years, that amounts to 20-some thousand, and it's a significant amount to our society and the work we do for youth. Anyway, I'll turn this over. I wanted to come before you. That there is a public face to our society, and I was a little reluctant to mention that I live in Victoria because everybody was saying they're from Oak Bay, but 3 of our board members are residents of Oak Bay. Anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'll turn you over to Mark Muldoon.
Some people refer to Victoria as Greater Oak Bay. It's part of thereof. Mr. Muldoon, welcome.
Yes, Mayor and Council, my name is Mark Muldoon, Executive Director of the Threshold Housing Society. Many of you may not know about the work we do, and I just want to refresh your memories if you don't, or if you have been reading the Oak Bay News. We've had a couple of articles in there about our adventure here at 2095 Granite Street. Threshold has been operating in the Greater Victoria area for some 25 years. We supply long-term, I emphasize long-term transitional housing for youth at risk of becoming homeless. We are not a shelter, we are not foster care, we are not an institution of any means. We provide a home-like environment for youth that are struggling with a lot of problems between the ages of 16 and 21. They come from everywhere. We've had our share of youth from Oak Bay High School, for example. These youth you do not see on the street, they are hidden. The fastest growing population within the homeless national population are between the ages of 16 and 24. The tent city issue will not go away. It's coming like a tsunami from other ends, for the simple reason is that this demographic, 16 to 24, 16 to 21, is extremely large, and there's a lot of problems going on, not only in our region, but nationally. So our services are extremely important. We get about 120 applications a year for about 35 beds in rooms or units that we have throughout the region. This particular property is very important to us. We have been looking for a long time for a property that suits our needs. It has to be small, because small is beautiful. We want a home-like environment, and yet we want to protect the privacy of youth when they do come into under our roof. This particular property suits all of our needs. It has 8 individual self-contained units, a large working area, commons area for life skills and development. It's close to bus routes. It's close to a very quiet neighborhood, which we want because we want to fit in with the neighborhood. We want to show that we can be good citizens, and which most of our youth are. And it's also close to a church that eventually will, I think, be working up toward a social enterprise with their thrift shop, because they need some strong backs, and we have youth that need work. So it works all the way around. The youth that we serve are troubled. They have a lot of anxiety, depression issues. But in the meantime, as I mentioned, they're not street entrenched. They're trying to finish high school. They're couch surfing. They're sleeping in RVs, people's basements, or being taken advantage of by unscrupulous landlords. Again, these youth are not the adult homeless population, and I ask you to make that, I make that strong distinction. There are certain reasons why youth are in this predicament, and they have barriers to getting off and getting onto their own track and following their dreams. One of the issues is that we live in a region with very, very difficult vacancy rates, high rental fees, for example. A lot of the youth are, again, still trying to finish high school, looking for jobs and looking for safe places to live. And that's what we wish to do. We wish to give them a safe place to live, deal with their anxiety issues, deal with the other issues. Perhaps it's family reconnect, perhaps it's getting mental health resources, and getting them back on track. I think this community, Oak Bay, can play a significant role in that regional venture of helping all of our youth become better citizens for tomorrow. I could go on at length about some of our dazzling results and triumphs with youth who go on to become very solid citizens, but they do need that one help up. They're not looking for a handout. We're looking for a handout, threshold, but not them. They're looking for a hand up, and we want to give it to them because we know that they have one key factor: resilience. If you've ever had teenagers in the family, you know that they can put up with a lot, they dish out a lot, but they can also come back up to the plate once they've been knocked down. And so we don't want them to go down into chronic poverty. We don't want them to go down into chronic homelessness. And this is the first way of deviating them from that route. The point in time count that was done in the region back in February of this year showed that 40% of all the people in those shelters and experiencing homelessness started their journey between the ages of 18 and under. If you don't stop it now, when do you stop it? We stop it now. That's our quest. That's one of our quests anyway, is to be an upstream project so that fighting homelessness and preventing it becomes a very, very strong motivation on our part to get this project off the ground. I'll stop there and perhaps entertain any questions from Dennis and myself.
Thank you, Mr. Muldoon. Let's see if there are any questions, not comments, but questions. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you so much, Chair. Very much in supportive of your society. And I do note, I actually first heard about you with the Hero Works work that was done down in the other building at Oak Bay and I think Davie, is it? That building down there. So I'm very pleased to see that you've got another building nearby. I presume you'll be, sharing admin and those sort of things to keep your costs down. That's excellent. On the short term, I hope that with respect to affordability, with respect to some other ways that we can encourage the availability of more inexpensive homes for youth or for new people starting out, that someday we can put you out of business.
Are you working up to a question?
Yes, I am leading up to a question.
Okay.
Do you think that the short-term residential aspects, such as Airbnb and vacation rental by owner, do you think that those sorts of things might be exacerbating and making the problem worse for you, since they seem to be sucking up some of the less expensive rooms that are available for rental by, for example, the youth? That was one question I wanted to ask, whether you had any inkling of that, whether short-term rentals are any causing problems that you're trying to solve here.
Yeah. I don't have any evidence that it's Airbnb particularly that's causing the problem, but it is the lack of, first of all, the low vacancy rate. There are no vacancy rates or vacancies in the $600 range that a youth might be able to rent. But at this point in time, a bachelor apartment now goes for about $900, way out of their range, and their key intention is to find a safe place, and that's the whole point. I think all of us like to go home and shut the door behind us at the end of the day. Can you imagine being 16, 17, 18 and not having that option of closing a door behind you? So it's a perfect storm here in Victoria with the high rental rates and the low vacancy rates that are causing the perfect storm for young people.
Okay, last question.
Okay, go ahead.
If I could just add to that. A lot of our youth don't know how to be a renter. So we provide training for them to learn how to be a renter, the responsibilities of being a renter. A lot of our youth are youth that have aged out of care, youth that are just totally, life skills are seriously found wanting. We teach them life skills, how to cook, how to be a good renter, and so forth.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you. Just to finish the last question, if I may. So approximately what percentage maybe that might you be serving a youth that are aging out of, for example, foster care or or that whole process? Because I understand that's fairly up in the news in terms of people that are sort of aging out of that system and then they have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Is that part of your demographic?
Certainly is. About 1,000 youth age out of the care in the province on an annual basis. About 40% at any one time will be aging out and coming into our services. Another 40% in that mix would be Aboriginal, transgendered. A lot of them are escaping abuse, whether it be physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. Again, these youth do not leave safe places. They leave places where they feel unsafe and seek out safe places. The worst places they seek out are probably with their peers. And so we want to give them an alternative.
Thank you. Councillor Ney, then Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Ney first, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Chair. My question, thank you for this work. It's just unquestionably very, very good, and thank you for coming to our community, and I'm pleased that it's working out for you. The ask here is about this permissive tax exemption. So my questions to you have to do with because this isn't easy, but we're a municipal government, we're not provincial government, we don't typically fund this kind of thing, and you're asking for an exemption for a property that you're working in. So I'm wondering if you could help me understand your budget, where you typically get your monies from, and what that looks like for you. I do appreciate it's never easy acquiring those fundings to balance your budget, but maybe you could just help me understand the funding sources.
You can give more specificity.
Thanks. For this particular project, we get from BC Housing, we get a rent supplement for each youth that comes in. That rent supplement has to be attached to the name. That rent supplement has nothing to do with the operating cost for the house. At this point in time, we receive no federal funding, no municipal funding, or provincial funding for that house. It all comes out of our own coffers through fundraising and donors. In this particular leasing option that we took with the church, we will be dealing with the taxes, dealing with the utilities, dealing with the upkeep of the building, as well as the rental fee. So this is a pricey operation for us. But again, because it fitted our modus operandi in terms of safety, location, and the type of building configuration, we felt this was worth the risk.
Thank you.
I just add to that is that we put what did I do? We put a substantial amount of monies into improving the building. I don't know if you've driven by the yard. The grounds have been totally cleaned up, a new fence beside the neighbor. We've painted the outside of it. The total inside of it has been painted. New toilets, new bathrooms. The building has really been thoroughly refurbished, which we did at our expense, to make a very habitable place for the youth. And as I say, I think the building looks a lot nicer than it did before.
Thank you.
One more comment. If I could just add to that, we did get a lot of support from the corporate community. Home Depot came into the painting for us, for example. They also supplied $30,000 toward capital costs. And Coast Capital also supplied $30,000 for, it promises to supply, we haven't got the check yet, for capital cost, plus some money toward operating fees, which we'll be looking forward to. But again, that's their intention, and we believe that they'll be forthcoming with that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if we're losing our welcome here, but just wanted to mention that that Home Depot has taken on the cause of youth homelessness across the country, and they've been very, very supportive of us.
Okay, question.
I was just looking to make the resolution.
Okay.
Or make a motion, sorry.
All right. There's another question over here. Question from Councillor Murdoch, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, I wanted, first, obviously, you guys do great work. I sit on the Coalition to End Homelessness, and this type of intervention early and so forth is incredibly important. That's actually not really what we're discussing here. Of course, it's the permissive tax exemption, and we of course haven't in the past provided any for anybody. So I'm curious on a couple of things. First, really a question to you. Is this something that you have gotten from other jurisdictions where permissive tax permissions are provided by the City of Victoria and other?
Yes, Victoria provides tax exemptions for, we have 3 properties in Oak Bay, in Victoria, and they are all provided with tax exemptions.
Is that true of other jurisdictions, or you don't have any other?
We don't have any others. We have a number of youth spread throughout Greater Victoria, but they are living independently and supervised by us in apartments. But we have 3 buildings in Victoria, and they are all receive tax exemption. I'm correct? Well, the 2 of those are owned by PC Housing, but they receive an exemption for it. And 1 is owned by us, and we receive an exemption.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had to staff was just that amount of tax, although if it's just our portion of it, that makes more sense. It seemed low for the building, so I was just, perhaps the Director of Finance, what is the tax rate on this building? Is it deemed institutional or part of the church, or how is it actually determined, the tax rate?
Through your worship, this particular property is deemed residential. The other permissive tax exemptions that we have provided are either Class 6 business or Class 8 recreational. This one is Class 1, which has a different tax rate.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I have a question for Ms. Carter. Do we have a sense of how many other of these kinds of organizations might fall within a policy if we were to make one? Because one of the things, Council, the reason for this question is because we're bound to apply some equity here, and before we go down that road, we need a kind of a sense. So that's my first question. I have another one after that.
Your worship, I don't have an exact sense at this time how many properties we may be looking at. However, I did do a little bit of background research, and in the past, a similar property has received a grant as opposed to a permissive tax exemption. So council does have that option of providing a grant as opposed to a permissive tax exemption.
And what about churches generally? How are they dealt with? Or places of worship?
Churches are exempt directly through legislation, so they receive a statutory exemption, which is different from a permissive tax exemption.
And just referring back to your comment about the grants, every year we leave some money aside that are not earmarked when we do our budget in April, or we finish it in April for grants. We have a lot of specific grants, but then we also have a kind of an open-ended pot that we can use to grants. Any idea how much we have in that particular fund at this point?
Yes, Your Worship. Each year we set aside a line item within the grant budget that allows for council at their discretion throughout the year to provide one-time grants that crop up during the year. In this case, we have approximately $9,000 left in that budget.
Okay. So, so this is the threshold, question 2 threshold, not threshold question, which is a bit different. And that is, have you considered that as an avenue, at least in the first, like we're just getting to know you. When did you open your doors?
Actually, I wanted to invite all of you. I know His Worship the Mayor is going to attend. We are going to have a grand opening on October 26th at 11:30, and you'd all be most welcome to come. That's the official opening.
How long have you been here unofficially?
About 3 weeks.
Okay, so we haven't gotten to know you all that well yet, and we will over the next year. So there is always that option of you coming forward with a grant, and then the other option would be coming back to us next year once you've established yourself once we've perhaps had a greater review of what the implications are. So that's another option as opposed to going right to the exemptions option. Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, just to reiterate my colleagues' comments, wonderful organization. You do great work within all of your communities. I actually like that suggestion of going for a grant right now, because I think that it would behoove us to look at how many other organizations within our municipality might be eligible for this sort of a grant or this sort of a tax exemption. And perhaps what we need to do is we need to look and see what criteria we might want to set out for other organizations to be able to come forward to ask for the same concession that you're asking for. So I would feel very comfortable doing some sort of a grant, giving them some sort of a grant for this year, and asking our staff to perhaps look at different criteria or different how many organizations we have within our community that could possibly come forward, and then inviting you to come back next year perhaps and asking for a tax exemption at that time.
So turning that into a question, would you be prepared to apply for a grant, depending, I mean, just as a theoretical at this point? Okay, all right. So I think I heard the possibility of a motion, and then we can take it from there.
I'd be prepared to make the motion that rather than the tax exemption that we, I'm not sure that I should.
Can we
I
just
have to make a
we
motion.
just receive it for information.
We could just receive it for information then, and
That's
encourage
correct. And
them to
then-
make the grant application.
And then there's an invitation, open invitation to
So-
apply against this money that we have set aside.
But we might include this as make a motion that requests staff bring this back to us as brings back a report regarding other properties in the district for next year.
Perhaps the implications of creating a new tax exemption policy, because the policy that we have now all relate to our own property, right? And so this would be stepping one step further. And I think we've had some of this in the past, and there are a lot of implications we have to consider, right? And we have to consider them carefully. This is public monies. So, but I think maybe you're coming around tax season, or not tax season, sorry, budget season, and in some time in April. Maybe would that be a good timeline, Ms. Carter?
Yes, Your Worship, it would.
But bring back a report on that so we can kind of have a sense of that. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Is that good? So
Should
the
I
motion
make that
is-
motion now, or
No.
that for April, or just we'll wait till the time comes for
Okay,
to.
let's just
for
find
the-
out. Ms. Koenig, would you like a motion to ask for a staff report? No, that's not necessary. So just a motion
All right.
to receive this at this point?
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. So,
Can I make a comment?
yes, I'm going to ask now for a debate, and that's the commenting time. Go ahead.
I thought
Councillor
you were going to
Kirby.
quickly call the question before I had a chance
no,
to
I always
comment.
ask. Are there
I just
anyone-
wanted to mention a couple of things. First of all, that on my way here tonight, I passed Oak Bay High School, where there were throngs of parents attending. And I asked, is there a concert on tonight? And I was told that no, it's actually an anxiety workshop taking place for parents. And apparently the theater is full at capacity. So that's 450 seats full of parents with children suffering from severe anxiety issues, enough that they would take up a Tuesday night to go to that session. So when you speak to the youth in your care, suffering from anxiety and depression, and coming from Oak Bay High, I think we can see exactly that is actually going on. And I applaud your efforts. And having my first job in Victoria was with a youth employment project where we dealt with youth, street youth as well. Was a huge eye-opener for somebody like me who came from a small town. And so I completely appreciate that there is a void and that there are so many applications and yet so few spaces available. again, speaks to the need. So I would 110% support your grant application should it come forward, and appreciate that the efforts you're making, and I hope that to see more spaces available in our community in the future, and hope that you will continue to work with us, as I know there are other properties in Oak Bay that may change hands at some point, and that you would consider also opening spaces for youth should those spaces come available. So thank you so much for all the work you do.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Just for their information, if they do apply for a grant, can we get an indication on when perhaps how long that process might take, just to give them some information on that?
In terms of application and stuff like that. And I think as soon as the application is in and meets all the criteria, I guess it'll be brought to council. So right now the ball would be in your court, and there are certain criteria that you have to address and documents that you have to attach. Budget documents and this type of thing, funding sources. So yeah, have a look at that. It's online. It is online. So yeah. So as soon as you get that in, staff will look at it and present it at a convenient council meeting. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
you.
Really appreciate it, and I appreciate the work you do. I think there's consensus in our community that's so valuable. What you're doing. Thank you. Yes. Have I called the question? That's the next stop, isn't it? More discussion. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Well, I haven't called the question, so let's just see. You're right. There was that little. I think that was the red card you were showing me. Was that it? And apparently, if I get two of them, I miss the next game.
I apologize. We were told 5 minutes.
Yeah,
That's it.
well.
And we've long since.
Yeah, you've exceeded that.
We've exceeded that.
Maybe the red card was for you, actually, when I think about it. Okay, Councillor Zelko, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do appreciate, again, I will be voting in favor of this, so just wanted to say that the session that's happening today at the Oak Bay High School has to do with understanding and supporting your anxious child, and it's open to all children, all parents, with such as us, my wife and I, who have students throughout the district of Oak Bay. The CRD. And so I'm very pleased to see it's very well attended, and hopefully that as the parents learn about all the things that the children have to go through, that none of them will need your services. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to call a question. I see no other hands to discuss this, correct? All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now your 5 minutes is up.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Number 10, notification for development applications with variances. This arose as a result of that efficiency report, if I can call it that, reducing red tape in the administrative process that was provided recently by our Director of Corporate Services. This is a step that we're being asked to consider and is being recommended. This doesn't require procedural bylaw changes. It really is a matter of policy. So let's see if there's any questions, and then I'll entertain a motion regarding this report. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you, Chair. A question for staff through you, of course. The notification that goes out in the proposed process, I presume, would talk about the recommendations and would talk about the fact that it's a tentative process and hasn't really been looked at by council at all. I'm not quite sure. Would the wording of the notice change as a result of this change in process, please?
Your Worship, no. The notice will be the same.
Okay. We're just taking one, which arguably unnecessary step out of the process. So I'm glad that we finally come back to that. I've often wondered myself why that step was there. But now we know. It's because it was, and it had been for a long time. So I'm glad someone had a closer look. Okay, go ahead, please.
I'll just move that council approve the revised process.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. Number 11, strategic plan update. And these are the quarterly updates we get from Ms. Koning, which has the column in it of what we've done and what we've not done. There's quite a number of dones in there, and that's always good to see. Questions for Ms. Koning or any of the staff who are involved specifically on any of these? Okay. Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Question for staff. The housing strategy. It says here that it remains part of the infill strategy, but I recall asking about this last year, and it seemed to be separate from the infill strategy. So I don't quite understand. Is it in? Is it out? Is it like, where is it? And I'll have a similar question. I'll follow up on the secondary suites review. I thought that was a separate process, but now it seems to be part of the infill. So I'm confused, actually. I'm sorry. Part of my confusion, as some may know, is that unfortunately I missed the priorities and planning meeting a year ago and did not receive any notes or minutes about that meeting for 11 months. I very much appreciate finally getting information about that meeting, but that has just simply left me totally confused with our process with respect to strategic planning. So I do look forward to hearing a bit of information in particular about housing strategy, secondary suites, and how it ties in with infill, please.
All right. Ms. Koning, or is you going to start this? Okay.
Yes, I am. I'm as confused as you are. So I think that part of it is that we have had 3 separate sort of processes in play. And I think that as we have begun the process of the infill strategy, we're working our way through that because we're hearing back that there's a number of different issues that are sort of coming out through that. We have people that are talking about secondary suites. We have people that are talking about housing strategies. And that's just from some preliminary things that I've looked at in terms of some of the survey results that we've gotten back, and you'll be seeing a bit more of that. So I think that part of this is they are all various components that have come out of the implementation page out of our OCP. It's the implementation of our OCP. So I think that there is some confusion around that. I think there's confusion in terms of what those terms mean. We're trying to work on getting some clarification on that for council and also for the community. So I think that you'll be seeing that over the course of the next couple of weeks. And with the patience and the indulgence of council, we have been kind of focused on a few other things at the moment. And so that's sort of the next item on staff's agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Koning. Any other questions? Okay. See another question. Moved to receive it. Thank you very much.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Oh, sorry. You're opposed. Sorry. Okay. That was number 11. Number 12. These are the minutes of the advisory design panel for the 6th of September.
Receipt.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Go ahead, please.
I just
Councillor
wanted,
Braithwaite.
thank you.
For
I
the
just
record.
wanted to say that it says members absent, Councillor Tom Croft, but then further down it says that Councillor Croft left the meeting. I'm not sure how he did that. However, I'm just wondering if he was actually there and then showed up and then left or whatever. I just thought maybe we want to correct that.
Okay, that might be a typo on one way or another. Can that be fixed? Thank you. Okay, good catch. And of course, on the night he's not here, but he might be in the minutes for all we know next time around. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed? We have the Advisory Planning Commission meetings and same date.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved, seconded. Any discussion or questions? Go ahead, please, Councillor Zelko.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not sure if this is an appropriate time to ask, but it does relate in general to the business of the Advisory Planning Commission. I understand there's been some discussion, and I do see that some element is within the minutes, with respect to its terms of reference, its mandate to move forward. Is there...
can you direct us to where in the minutes that is? Sorry,
well,
just so we can
in general,
follow.
with respect to... maybe I'll bring it up during new business then. I apologize. I'll bring it up another time. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. It's just if it was in there, I might have missed it. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
I do have one question. I noticed that in the minutes it did say that Mr. Stinson was stepping down because he was going off to university, so congratulations for that. And I'm just wondering if we will wait until January to replace that position or whether we will replace it now.
It will be with the new set of appointments, Your Worship.
That makes most sense. Thank you.
Okay, which brings up another interesting point, which is kind of peripheral, but it's related to the timing. Typically, we make these reappointments in and around the inaugural meeting. I just came across a report of the CRD that said the law is now that the inaugural meeting must be in November. And that's, I assume, because the elections are moving forward. Now, I don't know when that has to be in, but I know, I think tomorrow the CRD will be considering that as a start to change their inaugural meeting. Now, there's only one inaugural meeting, and that's when there's a new council, but we typically use that anniversary to announce these appointments and any other changes there might be around the council table in terms of our assignments regionally or locally. So I just, if I could just kind of put that into people's thinking. We may not have to do it for a while. Okay. So we have a motion to receive. Thank you. Go ahead,
thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Zelka, please.
Thank you, Chair. I did find out where in the minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
I apologize. It's in item 6.
Item 6.
Part B and Part C. And I just wanted to understand what this is telling me, since these minutes is the way that the Commission sort of speaks to us. In Part 6, Part B, it talks about how the advisory, the APC is developing some sort of a Commission manual. And in 6 Part C, it talks about how there's some question of the effective communication through to from them to us. I was wondering if I could possibly understand what's being said to me in these minutes, because I didn't quite understand or catch the flavor of what's being said here.
Okay. Unfortunately, the chair of the Advisory Planning Commission is not here, but Ms. Jensen was present, or maybe Ms. Koenig knows.
So, so I can start with that, and then I'll ask Ms. Jensen to comment further. I did have a meeting this summer, actually, with both the chair and the vice chair of the Planning Commission, and they had done some research and had seen some other manuals that have been used by other planning commissions, and they wanted to take some time to review them. It's basically just sort of a process manual in terms of how they would do business, and they're not extensive, they're not lengthy. I think a couple of them are probably 6-8 pages. So I think it's to help them to start, because this is very new for the district, and so I think that's what they were intending to do in terms of that advisory. So I think that answers the first question. The second one, I think, is to ensure that they are effectively communicating information to council so that the timing of things come at the appropriate time. So there was just some discussion about how they ensure that happens and tighten that up.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Councillor Zelka.
Follow-up then. So we just sort of approved an efficiency process, and we talked about it, with respect to also, at other times, we've modified how the minutes are actually being done. So the council minutes are really being sort of boiled down. But I understand in this 6C, it's talking about that effective communication between that commission and council. So I presume that the efficiencies that we're talking about at this level won't boil down to that level, that we'll still get a flavor of the discussion that happens at that commission level, as opposed to just what was passed and, do you hear what I'm trying to say? I was concerned with the wording here.
But I'm not sure that I can give probably the best synopsis of that. That's probably something maybe I can probably give that to Ms. Jensen to answer.
Cool. Go ahead, Ms. Jensen, please.
Yeah, there's definitely been conversation with the Advisory Planning Commission since their inception, which is just coming up on a year, as to how their recommendations and their discussion moves forward to council, either as general comments or through applications. So the discussion has revolved really twofold. one, how they carry forward those general conversations through the minutes, which was discussed at that efficiency meeting. And I believe Mr. Jones at that time said that we really don't anticipate changing the minutes of the committees at this point in time. So you will still see that flavor through the minutes of the commission. The second part of that was really on their motions and their discussion around individual applications and how we wrap that not only into the minutes but also into the content that you get in the staff report. So council's probably noticed that as we've moved forward through time, you're getting a bit more meat in that section around the commissions as to what was actually said at the meeting. So that was the other component of this.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have a motion on the floor. To receive, do we? Yes, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. We go on to the correspondence section, and
Move receipt.
okay. There's a piece of correspondence that we're going to receive, which comes up a little later. So we're on item 14. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. The new business. New business. Anyone have new business? Okay. Go ahead.
Is this an appropriate time to ask you a question about the...
If it's new business.
Oh, new business. Yes. The provincial urban deer report. In the last council meeting, I believe you gave a bit of an update, and I noticed in the minutes that we approved, it was excellent. And in the minutes that we approved this earlier on today, it said that there would be an application process in early October. So I wanted to ask about that. And if you had any update on that. I also wanted to ask if you were able to find out through yours sitting on this provincial urban deer, oh my God, what's the name of it again?
Advisory Committee.
Advisory Committee.
PUDAC.
PUDAC. I was wondering if you were able to possibly find out how much money was left on the table of last year's $100,000.
There's no update. The meetings, there's not been any meetings or discussions since I reported out last. And I have not been in touch with the ministry person, who's Jeff.
It's Jeff Morgan.
Morgan. So he's the one that would know, and I've not been in touch with him. He has been sending some things around in preparation for the next meeting, which is yet to be scheduled. So as soon as that meeting is held, I'll report out. Thank you. Okay, any other new business? All right. Report on the CRD. We're having a meeting tomorrow. I mentioned that one thing that's on there. You can see what the issues are, and I'll report back once we've had that meeting. Other verbal reports. I have a verbal report. Lights, cameras, action. Let me see if I can do this all by myself. Oops. Let me preface this by saying that this is something that came, this is something that was, a presentation was made to the mayor's fall caucus meeting just before UBCM. And there's a number of items. It's more for a briefing and letting you know what we were told. What I've done is, with permission from UBCM and the Mayor's Caucus, I've just extracted a little bit about the BC Gas Tax Fund overview, just to give you a little bit of update on that, because there is some good news in this, and this is part of the good news. So there has we do have a renewed agreement that was in effect as of the 2014, but the term of the newer agreement now has been extended for 10 years, and will deliver, as you can see that figure, over 1.3 million over the next 5 years of the agreement. UBCM is administering the gas tax agreement on behalf of Canada and the province during that next 10 years. And it is a bit unique in the country. I don't know if any other province is doing the same thing, but I think it shows the confidence in our organization, that is the municipal local government organization, that the province and the federal government would enter in this kind of agreement. This just gives you an idea of the money. We know year one is passed, but you can see by the time we get to the end of 2019, You can see a slight increase as we go forward to the point of 1.3 billion. This illustrates that the estimated funding over the next 5 years, including a 2% indexing fee, I'm told, indexing increase in years 3 and 5. So, there's also some expectation that from years 6 to 10, we'll see a new formulation based on population, because that's how it's given out on the basis of population throughout the country. The eligible, there was some talk about eligible projects. These are a bit of an illustration here, and the categories. These are the existing ones, the continuing ones, and you can see there that water and wastewater, local roads and bridges, continue to be eligible. And really, when you look at here, what this is really saying is that there's a focus on sustainable infrastructure. But we'll see that there's been some new eligible categories. You can see there sports infrastructure as examples, tourism infrastructure, cultural infrastructure, and they might include such things as a library upgrade, new benches in an arena if we need those, a skateboard park improvements. We have a very tiny skateboard park. Tourism information center upgrades. We don't have a tourist information, but establishing one could also be, I can't say that off the top of my head whether it will. And recreation infrastructure, which is good news, again, for those of us who have fairly extensive recreation facilities and disaster mitigation. So under the recreation infrastructure, there's some, it might be arena upgrades or trail networks, and I don't know if that include bike trail networks, but that's something we can look at. So the objectives now we can see is kind of the federal objectives are threefold. Productivity and economic growth, and you can see that there's some expansion there. A clean environment continues to be the one of the thrusts, and of course strong cities and communities, and that's that infrastructure, the cultural infrastructure, which will provide those. So it's I think it's good news that now we can apply for a wider variety of grants, and I'm sure within that we'll find quite a bit that we can qualify from. So that's all I wrote. There's more. That's just an extract of. There we go. How did I do, Ms. Jones, in terms of handling that electronic infrastructure? Can I get a grant for it? It's the green card. Thank you very much. Ms. Kirby. Oh, Councillor Kirby.
Thank you. I misunderstood. I thought that this was a new step forward in the way we were receiving grant monies from the federal government. I thought when you said this was gas tax money, that it was that stable, predictable funding that we receive every year. But but now it's starting to, the categories in which we can spend it on expand. Are widened.
Yeah, so for instance, if we are fortunate enough to get some of this other infrastructure monies, not gas tax, but infrastructure monies, we could start looking to the gas tax money for something other than separating the sewers and uplands, right? And so it'll give us a much wider base to consider. And what this does is it allows communities to kind of suit their own priorities. I mean, it's not wide open. You can spend anything you want. There's still categories. But it's of such a nature that I think we can find something within our own priorities to spend that money on.
So by giving us the responsibility, we're also allowed to decide how we spend the money as well, that's fantastic.
That's right. Okay. So for instance, I know...
I just thought it was another grant application that we were going to have to make, but we don't have to make that grant application. We'll just have to make the grant applications for our larger infrastructure projects, and so that we can displace it. Okay.
But so, for instance, I think one good news is the library upgrades, right? If we see that we're able to free, or other communities see they're able to free this gas tax money up for something like that, which we couldn't in the past, right? It tended to be that water, wastewater, the ones you saw in one of those things. So I think it's some good news. It's moving ahead because often when monies like this are tied to very specific upper level government priorities, it can skew smaller communities' priorities. You end up doing something that the federal government wants where that might be low on your list of things, the needs in your community. So I think there's some good news here.
There's some good news, but it doesn't take away the legislation and regulation that have been imposed upon us that force us to do certain projects before others. But I do appreciate that this was piled on top of the other two presentations we had earlier this evening on active transportation. How interesting.
Okay. That's just the way I think the paper fell, I think. I don't think there was anything.
There's
I don't
more
think it's
to
symbolic.
that.
This isn't one of those, what was that, Dan Brown books where everything's symbolic? Okay. Any other new business or verbal reports? None. Let's move. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Very quick on this. Just a heads up, I'll be attending on behalf of the library the Victoria Book Prize this Wednesday, which is one of a few initiatives just supporting local authors and so forth. So I just wanted to bring that to people's attention. I think this is the third year maybe that's been in place. And I was also going to mention the Heritage Lecture on October the 19th, next Wednesday. So thank you for doing that for me, Councillor Kirby.
Thank you very much. So
there's a much bigger audience than there is now.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you. I do notice that part of the cultural infrastructure for BC Gas Tax Fund overview is that we could, in terms of the Oak Bay portion, use that to help build maybe a new library in Oak Bay. I wonder during the library update whether...
That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. And I do like the idea of maybe this clean water, wastewater fund possibly at 17 cents per dollar. Being as a way of offsetting that gas tax and allowing us to bring in some new ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Ms. Koning, please.
I think it is important, though, to note that there may be some restrictions about using the gas tax money as that portion, because they consider that to be kind of like double dipping. Yep. And so they're not looking, yeah.
So
exactly.
we may not be able to use that $7 million we have saved as part of our 17%. We don't.
Provided where all of that money came from to begin with.
All right. So, I think we're now on to tabled resolutions. The first one is a development variance permit application at, let me just pull that up, excuse me, at 2741 Dudney, and notice has been given.
Move to lift.
Okay.
Second.
Moved. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. This motion is now live. Anyone wishing to address us on this on 2741 Dudney? Is the applicant here? Hello, applicant. And is anyone else who wishes to address us? So I just stay there for the applicant. I just want to see if there's any questions for the applicant at this point. There's no questions. Okay. Discussion. I see no discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. So that was a long wait for a 30-second cameo. Thank you very much. We have number 17, which is execution of a 219 covenant at 1660 Monterey. And that is a resolution notice. And that was, yes, we've had this before us, and this had to do with a planner's report back in May recommending covenant be registered. So it's essentially is authorizing myself and the Director of Corporate Services to execute this particular covenant. Execute means fill it out, complete it. Okay. Yes, thank you.
A question, I guess, before we get to the actual motion. A question of staff. I understood from our previous discussions in terms of sort of policies we've set around the 219 covenants that that if it's part of our normal process that it would just get taken care of and that we wouldn't bring it to council. And the fact I recall this was brought forward by some of my colleagues here at the table.
Okay, which person from the corporate services would like to address that?
Yes, please. How is this different than what we normally do? Thank you.
Your indulgence, Chair, just doing a little corporate services tennis there, excuse me. We do have an existing delegation bylaw, so that bylaw will need to be updated. We do have the recommendation from Committee of the Whole that will flow through at that time, then staff would have authorization.
Okay, but that's a procedural change, not the earlier one, which is policy change, so that has to be a procedural bylaw or delegation change, okay? So we need a motion, if anyone cares to make it. Okay. Councillor Zelka.
Moved as recommended by council, by staff. Thank you.
Okay.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Discussion. Go ahead, please. Okay. Councillor Murdoch.
I'll try not to take too much time on this one. I think I've probably said my piece on most of this. I have a question for staff on this. Is just understanding this is a voluntary process from the applicant. I heard from the applicant probably a couple of weeks ago that they were not looking at going down this path if it was optional. I'm just curious if they've heard from the applicant if this is a process that they're interested in and is their desire to go down the covenant path for protection.
It is my understanding that the covenant was in agreement with pursuing a covenant. We've had the discussion on numerous occasions. On at least 3 different times now they've confirmed that yes, they do want to do the covenant. I do have the signed covenant here.
Thank you. Any other questions?
If I could just I'll take just 2 minutes if I may to just make a point, because I'm not going to support the motion. I still think this is the wrong process for it, and not that I appreciate this as being driven, by the staff and the applicant and the council and the community want to do the best to protect the environment here and to look for every reasonable path forward. And so I applaud the staff for doing that. I look at this with 4 questions. Does it help achieve the outcomes, the objectives of the OCP? Is the cost and hassle proportional? Is the meaningful environmental protection being achieved? And if this is voluntary, is it willingness of the landowner? So thank you for answering the last of those questions. I just look at this first at the OCP objectives of the watercourses development permit area. They're very clear. One is to apply the provincial regulations. Second is to support species biodiversity for economic vitality of fisheries. And third, to guide good development in a way that minimizes environmental impacts on aquatic and riparian habitat, fish and wildlife. And if I use those objectives of the OCP, this seems like a very heavy-handed way for property so far away from the creek bed. I think where this applies most strictly is where it's directly adjacent to the creek bed, or certainly in the lands where it goes into the creek bed, and those where these have to sort of have these kind of strength of covenants. Second is the cost proportional. I just look at this from a procedural perspective. There's a lot of cost attached to this in terms of developing the covenants, writing up the agreements, having the legal costs borne by taxpayers and reviewed by the lawyers of the applicant, and so forth. So, is it proportional? I have a hard time seeing that in this particular case, specifically to 1660 Monterey, which does sit so far from the riparian area, the direct riparian area. And that brings me to my third and final point on this, is whether there is any meaningful environmental protection achieved at all in this case. And the intent here is to protect the riparian areas, which are defined as the areas bordering on streams, lakes, and wetlands that link water to land. So I look at this as the plantings that are 57 feet, or the narrowest 30-odd feet from a rock wall beside a creek, link that water to land, and I don't see it that way. Will the native plantings make a meaningful difference, particularly given that the intervening land is a large hedge owned by the municipality, decorative flower plantings owned by the municipality, a large grass field owned by the municipality, a 9-foot wide concrete path owned by the municipality, and then a rock wall that's 6 feet high adjacent to the creek. Controlling the plantings so far away, putting that restriction, having a legal covenant for that, it can have almost essentially zero positive or negative impact on the creek at this point. So for those reasons, I just have a hard time supporting it. I would support a motion that said we apply this covenant at such time as the municipality made meaningful reclamation work to the lands adjacent to the creek. But at this time, it just seems a pointless process for the sake of a small narrow window attached so far from the creek bed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Just go ahead, please, Councillor Kirby.
Just those are thoughtful comments, Councillor Murdoch. While I appreciate exactly what you're saying, I also think that from the perspective of the 100-year plan for Bowker Creek and opportunities to redevelop the creek on the part of the municipality, we have to take whatever steps we can whenever we can. I mean, there won't be another opportunity for a very long time for us to make an agreement with a neighboring property. And so I think that's should be our goal, that when we have the opportunity, we seek to make that arrangement with that property owner. And because should in the next few years we have, a wonderful grant opportunity to redevelop the creek as we've done at the high school, and suddenly that rock wall is eliminated and we have the space, which is now grass, returned to a more natural state, and the opportunity to improve the riparian area, it becomes available, then we've already done what we needed to do with that homeowner. And that hedge may be gone, and there may be a change to the whole slope, because you do need a wider space when you take away the retaining walls. I think we have to, because we've endorsed the 100-year Bowker Creek plan, we have to embrace it wholeheartedly and believe that eventually we'll get there, and that eventually we will find ways to improve that creek and that creek bed. And so while I understand the frustrations on the part of the homeowner, and I understand that this does feel like added bureaucracy or added steps, I think it's the only opportunity we have as an institution to kind of influence change over the long term. And I also think that our staff have made every attempt, at least in the questions I've asked, that to make sure that it isn't an onerous and expensive process for the homeowner, that the only legal expenses they may have had were to have it checked by their own lawyers. But I don't think it's become what I initially thought was a barrier to development. It hasn't become a delay or an added burden or expense to the homeowner. So, and I know this is our first one, so it probably wasn't as smooth sailing as everyone would have hoped. But I think it does signal to the community that we believe in that 100-year plan, and we want to see more than just crayfish in the creek, as my son found evidence of this week. So there was salmon in that stream, and the orcas are suffering because they don't have the supply of salmon that they need in our strait. So we should do our part. We should do whatever we can. And I think this is a tiny infinitesimal step towards that. But it's part of believing in the bigger plan and embracing the opportunities when they come to us.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers on the issue? Okay. Just wanted to ask you a quick question before I say a few words. Did we not do something similar on Beach? And also too, have we executed that covenant? All right. So this flows. It's a similar approach. Is that correct? All right. So I think we've set a precedent, and I think we had lots of advice on that from our staff, our lawyer at that time. This is an extra measure of safety and security for the community, and I think it's well worth it. All right. Any other speakers? If not, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed. Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite and Murdoch. Thank you. Passes. Move on to, that was 17. We skip 18 because it's a memorandum dealing with 19 and 20. We skip 19 because we've already done that. We're on to 20. This is the one I referred to earlier. This is a property tax exemption. And there we have listed the Scout Hall, the Guide Hall, the Kiwanis Tea Room, and the Oak Bay Lawn Bowling Club, all on our owned property. So we need a first reading of 4670, please.
Move for first reading.
Second.
Moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Second reading, please.
Move second reading.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Third reading,
Move
please.
third reading.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. And then we have the reading.
I'll move that the open portion of the meeting of council be adjourned and that a closed session be convened to discuss personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality, labor relations or other employer relations, and litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality.
Thank you very much. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming and staying with us for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Appreciate it. Thanks to staff too. Bye-bye.